Steve players, we have been using Lionheart incorrectly this whole time. And this matters heavily because currently our character sucks complete arse and we need every little thing to gain an advantage over our opponents. Using this stance like it was more than likely intended to be used is vital for the survival of our race. So listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you all. But first, like, subscribe, comment, and actually subscribe. I'm trying to hit 1k subscribers by the end of the month with my trash mic. So please, for the love of God, subscribe. It will help me a lot. Thank you. Now let's get into it. Lionheart's stance, as many of you guys probably already know, only has 3 moves. Lionheart 1, which is a 14 frame homing mid heat engager. Lionheart 2, which is a 16 frame launching mid. And Lionheart 1+2, which is a 20 frame high guard break, which gives plus 12. So you get a 3-2-2 or 2-1 or whatever. I think the max damage you can get from this guard break is 19. So at face value, what you see here is 2 very strong mids and a high guard break, which gives you 3 damage. So it looks like a 50-50, right? A slightly unorthodox 50-50, but still a 50-50. Well, the manual way of going into Lionheart does this big step backwards, so you can't actually force the mix onto your opponent like this because you're backing away from them. So we have to look at the moves that go into this stance. Also, before I really get into this, note that you cannot block when you're in Lionheart. It's important to know this as I go along in the video. Back 1-2 and down back 3-2 on hit both give +7 and go into Lionheart. The issue is that at +7, every single one of Steve's options from this stance could be power crushed. This means that the stance is practically useless at forcing a mix. There are some exceptions to this. Forward 2-2 on hit gives +1 and a blocked heat smash gives +8, and at +8 and above, Lionheart 1 is uninterruptible, so technically you do have a mix. However, Lionheart 1 is -9 on block, so you give up your turn if it's blocked. So pretty much this is a 50-50 in your opponent's favour. Of course, there are some ways to circumvent this power crush. You can duck right and left to avoid the power crush and punish. For high power crushes, you can weave back. However, if you guess wrong and they don't power crush, you get launched, so still a 50-50 in your opponent's favour. There's some tech where you can switch to peekaboo from Lionheart to throw an incoming power crush, but once again, if you guess wrong, you get launched, so same issues. So what Steve mains have done is looked at this stance, told themselves it sucks, and the character sucks. And to be fair, the character is still bad, but this stance is much better than many of you think. Lionheart is a defensive stance, not an offensive one. Look at this. When I manually enter Lionheart, look at this step. Look at this step back. Look at what he does. This is literally Kempo. Of course I'm not stupid, it's a lot more limited than Kempo, but at the core you step back creating a whiff and you launch. This is Kempo. This is the way that you use Lionheart in neutral. Steve's wall carry is great, so a lot of times you hit one of these, your opponent's at the wall, and you're at an advantage. This is super strong, especially as you can duck cancel out of this and go straight into pressure if you really feel like it. This really leans into Steve's methodical style of play. Your opponent is naturally going to be completely terrified of back 1 constantly. Nobody wants to just walk into a back 1. It changes how your opponent approaches you and creates different timings for you to hit your opponent in, right? And Lionheart complements this perfectly, as it gives another thing for your opponent to think about when approaching you, because they can get launched in 2 different very powerful ways. I'm not done. I said that this was a defensive stance, and that doesn't only mean whiff punishment. Now, I'm not going to act like I've done the most in-depth research into this, but I know for a fact that you can use the manual Lionheart transition as an option select for certain strings and moves, especially moves that go into a stance. For example, we have Leo right here. A lot of you guys are likely to be very familiar with this knee. It gives him like +9 and goes into stance. It's great. Now it's fair to assume that Leo wants to do something with this stance, right? So he's going to click a button. Except when you see this knee, weave, bow. How dare you assume that you can click buttons in front of Steve? Let's test it on someone else. We've got Rainer here. Weave, bow. Let's test it on another move. Weave, bow. Now this doesn't work on things that are long range, so you should be aware of that. However, this is still ridiculous in my opinion. As people gain more knowledge on what you can use this against, Steve is likely to get better and better as time goes on. This is really strong and kicks Steve up a couple of pegs on the tier list. Reina has a lot of mix-ups that are like relatively safe, like they're minus 12, minus 14, stuff like that. Not too detrimental. This throws that out of the window. You now have an option to just straight up launch your opponent for literally no reason. And if you really want to play it safe, just go for Lionheart 1. It's safe and a heat engager, you still get a reward for it. This is great for Steve mains. I think that it's time for Steve mains to really hit the lab and see what you can do with this. But until next time, Jin mains, I haven't forgotten about you guys. I promise, I have not forgot. I haven't. Your time is coming.